This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth, for competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty, for the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. A lot going on, some very serious matters in this country. We're going to have Laura Loomer on, that very valiant female Jewish American activist for all people. She'll be on in the third segment. But let me talk about what's happening this week. We've continued at Freedom Watch with our citizens' grand juries. We're now into our third session. We're going to have another session next week. You can tune in at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific at freedomwatchusa.org. See it in real time. It's also up there being recorded. You can watch the first three versions. And we're going to be doing this every Thursday as citizens' grand juries generally meet, as grand juries meet, even when the so-called government conducts them under our Department of Injustice. We have been pursuing the indictment of the illegitimate president, Joe Biden, his illegitimate son, in a general sense. It's actually his son, regrettably for him and for the country, Hunter Biden, and also James Biden, Joe Biden's brother. It has been widely reported, it has been widely investigated that Hunter Biden, with James Biden and others, their associates, and other members of the Biden family, have laundered what is likely hundreds of millions of dollars into the accounts of the family, with a 10% cut for Joe Biden. Where did these monies come from? They came from communist China. They came from Ukraine. They came from Russia. It was part of a shakedown operation, a 1-2 punch, so to speak, where when Joe Biden was vice president, he would put pressure on these countries, and in exchange, to try to get some kind of relief, they would pay money. It's a common phrase, shakedown. It's a common practice in Washington, D.C. What Joe Biden and Hunter Biden did is not that unusual. It just so happens, however, that the so-called president of the United States now is bought and paid for by the butchers of Beijing. The butchers who killed 10,000 of their own people at Tiananmen Square in 1991, when mostly students were just walking through the streets of Beijing with a mock-up statue of the Statue of Liberty. They wanted freedom. Joe Biden has been very light on China. We paid the price for his having been compromised by the communist Chinese through his son, Hunter. Just this week, Peter Doocy of Fox News asked Joe Biden at a press conference if he'd even talked to the president of China about COVID-19 and their failure to warn the rest of the world of the dangers. And we know it's much worse than that. What emanated from the lab in Wuhan, China, and Freedom Watch brought class action lawsuits in Dallas, Texas, and in Jerusalem, Israel over that for the huge damage to our health, to the economy, to our emotional well-being. Joe Biden was asked, have you talked to the president of China? And arrogantly, he walks off and says, no. Now, why hasn't he raised anything with China? Because he's bought and paid for by the butchers of Beijing. And now, Hunter Biden, that drug addict who just published a book about his, quote, life's story, as if anyone really wanted to read it. You can read about it when he gets indicted and tried and convicted and sentenced to prison in our citizens' grand juries. But you can read about what he claims now is a fiction. He doesn't know if the laptop that contains incriminating information about this bribery scheme is his. Well, the so-called FBI has been investigating that, so-called because you can't expect anything to happen either from the FBI or the Department of Injustice, my once proud alma mater. How would someone write a book now revealing the details of his drug addiction, so much so that he would even snort Parmesan cheese that fell onto the floor thinking that that was crack cocaine? He's proud of that. He goes on Jimmy Kimmel and brags about things like that. Jimmy Kimmel, of course, sets him up and asks him questions that are little powder puff questions because Kimmel's gone completely left. I mean, he's radical left at this point. The guy's a complete disgrace along with the rest of Hollywood, mostly the rest of Hollywood, not the conservatives, but the left in Hollywood, the Jewish left in Hollywood is behind a lot of this. Kimmel's not even Jewish. I'm Jewish myself, so you can't call me anti-Semitic. But the bottom line is this. The bottom line is that Hunter Biden is dead to rights. And the bottom line is he's being protected. And he can write a book like that. And he can bring out into the open things that he's done and brag about it because he knows that the FBI and the Department of Justice will take no action against him because the Justice Department now is totally controlled by the Biden-Harris administration and the left. It is now being used as a type of Gestapo. I'm sure the agents don't welcome that or like that, but they're being ordered to go out into the hinterland of the United States and terrorize anyone who was at President Trump's speech on January 6th, 2021 in Washington, D.C., to terrorize the people that walked into the Capitol peacefully and legally. I'm not talking about a few criminals on either side, but most of these people were good Americans. They had had it. They had seen the total corruption in government, and they couldn't take it anymore. And the straw that broke the camel's back were the judges, even Trump judges and Supreme Court justices that threw President Trump under the bus and resulted in a total leftist takeover of this country. A push to socialism, a push to communism, a push to atheism, a push to radical Islam, a push to the Marxian Jewish left, a push to LGBTQ, a push to atheists, a push to radical blacks. And now today we even see that Biden and Harris have opened up an office of racism and health in the Department of Health and Human Services because Black people allegedly live less years than white people. This is now racist. Is it racist that Black people eat a lot of greasy food? Is it racist that they go to fast food a lot? Is it racist that they eat a lot of sugar? That goes without saying. Just look around. So if they're dying sooner, is that the fault of white people? This has become like the Fourth Reich in the years leading up to the rise of Adolf Hitler and thereafter. White people have become the new Jews. They've become the scapegoats for everything that is happening. Yes, racism was wrong. Yes, that needed to be addressed, and Abraham Lincoln did address it, and we made great progress. But then along came a president who resented his half-Black self, Barack Obama, maybe because he never really felt accepted into either race. He's the one who began this downward slide, pitting white against Black. And I might add, I have many Black conservative friends in particular, good people, courageous people, standing up to what's going on right now, not willing to take it, much like I'm not willing to take it from the Jewish left, which has manipulated the radical Black community, used the Marxians, the disciples of Marx, the disciples of Trotsky, the disciples of Saul Alinsky, the disciples of George Soros. George Soros, by the way, a self-hating Jew who, along with his father, confiscated the property of Jews going to gas chambers and ovens in World War II to save their own skin. I would rather die than to do something like that. I am a proud Jew and a proud Christian. I'm a proud Zionist. And these people that pollute the good people in these groups, and there are good people in every group I just mentioned, these radicals, should be weeded out peacefully and legally. And what you see right now, particularly with the All-Star game in Atlanta, which was moved to Colorado because with false claims that the Georgia election law that was just legislated prevented black vote. It didn't. Even the Washington Post was forced to admit that. When you see Coca-Cola, when you see Delta, when you see Microsoft, when you see all these corporations backing the left because they think that somehow Biden and Harris and the left are going to scratch their backs and make them more money in their corporations, it reminds you of what went on in Nazi Germany, because it was BMW, it was Mercedes, it was Lights, it was Deutsche Bank that actually financed the concentration camps. By the way, they financed the Clintons' first house, and I killed that in a case when I was running Judicial Watch. This is what props up these dictators, these leftist dictators, because every aspect of society, whether it's corporations, whether it's sports leagues, whether it's labor unions, whether it's large law firms, the legal profession is far left. Okay, the DC bar, the disciplinary apparatus, they're all supporters of Clinton and Obama. That's why they're trying to eliminate me as a lawyer and other lawyers like Rudy Giuliani, like Ted Cruz, like Kellyanne Conway, like Bill Barr, who wasn't even that harmful to them. He put his head in the sand, but they don't care because it's a full court effort to destroy conservatives, people of faith, and those who believe in the vision of our founding fathers. And that's why I wrote my book, It Takes a Revolution. Forget the scandal industry. We have to rise up peacefully and legally with citizens' grand juries. We will be indicting Biden and his son and his brother. We will hold them accountable. We will try them. We'll move on to Comey. We'll move on to Clapper. We'll move on to Brennan. We'll move on to the Obamas. We'll move on to the Clintons. And we will bring about justice. We will take back our legal system, just like our founding fathers did when King George III stole it from the American colonies and took it back to London, England. I'll be right back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Stay tuned. We have a lot of work to do.
Fearless.
He's claiming he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Let me also tell you what is creating the flashpoint for a second American revolution. Ask yourself this fundamental question. Who was worse, King George III in 1776 or Biden and Harris in 2021? King George III was not a socialist. King George III was not a communist. King George III was not a radical atheist. King George III was not a radical black. He was not a radical Muslim. He was not a radical member of the Marxian Jewish left. He was not a radical gay, lesbian, and transgender. He was not a radical feminist. Like I said, most people in these groups are good people, but the radicals have taken over, much like the Bolsheviks did in Russia, and the Ayatollahs did in Iran, and Kim Jong-un did in Korea. I can go on and on. This is a crisis. And what happened in the years leading up to July 4th, 1776, when we declared independence? The king overly taxed the colonies, taxation without representation. The colonies were rich. The colonies were fat and happy. But the king needed to pay for the rest of his empire. So he did it on the backs of the American colonies. Secondly, he took the legal system away so he could enforce his edicts. Sound familiar? So far, 34 executive orders by Biden and Harris, more than the king was even issuing at that time, ramming socialism and communism down our throats, bringing in across the border hordes of illegal aliens that will then vote Democrat because they'll get licenses in states like California and New York, cementing the total leftist hold on this country. And then, of course, there were the guns. When hostilities broke out at Lexington and Concord before July 4th, 1776, and in New York City, the king sought to seize our firearms, sought to take our methods of self-defense away from us, giving rise to the Second Amendment. What is Biden's latest executive order? To cut back on the Second Amendment with the ultimate goal, obviously, to seize guns, as Beto O'Rourke in Texas has been advocating and other leftists have been advocating as well. That's what dictators do. Whether it was Nazi Germany, whether it was Cuba, whether it was Venezuela, whether it was Iran, whether it's North Korea, the guns are seized. Biden says yesterday, he's quoted on this, no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. Incredible statement. Yes, it is absolute, unless you amend the Constitution. And in fact, we're going to make some amendments to the Constitution, which allow for discrimination on the basis of political ideology and belief. We're going to talk about that with Laura Loomer and what we've been trying to do with regard to court cases and the Supreme Court. We, the American people, are trying to be protected by the Second Amendment, our right of self-defense. The left wants to take that away, to have total domination over this country. We now live in a Fourth Reich. The Third Reich was under Hitler. We live in a Fourth Reich. You see it from every aspect of society. Big tech, which censors what we want to do, colleges and universities, which discriminate against those students who are conservative, who believe in the rule of law and believe in the vision of our founding fathers, sports leagues who move all-star games because someone said it was racist to actually require identification with regard to voting. Anyone who complains about the deluge of illegal immigrants at the border is racist. And now we even have in the Department of Health and Human Services a racism and health section. Yes, white people have become Hitler's Jews. We should all wear Stars of David, and we should say, yes, we are white, so you can discriminate against us. Well, there's going to be a lot of white flight going on. Already people are leaving for Australia. Greg Norman, who was proudly in the United States with a lot of holdings, sold everything. He's moving back to Australia. Even the head of Fox News, the leftist, Lachlan Murdoch, he's fleeing the country to go back to Australia. This is what's going to happen. We've become like South Africa. Certainly apartheid was wrong as slavery was wrong, but it was taken over by the African National Congress, and the whites fled. Country's in crisis. I'll be right back with Laura Loomer, and we'll talk about what we're doing to fight the second American revolution peacefully and legally. Stay tuned, because we are in dire straits. We better pull ourselves out of this nosedive before it's too late.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with Laura Loomer, that very courageous female, Jewish, and more importantly, American conservative activist, someone who has risked all because she believes in this country. She believes in the vision of our founding fathers. She believes that everyone's equal. No one should be discriminated against, but will stand up for the rights not just of Jews, but all people. Will stand up for the rights of even white people who have become the Jews of the Biden-Harris era and the total takeover by the left. Laura and I have brought several lawsuits. She's been defamed many, many times. She's been called a white supremacist, a white nationalist, alt-right. She's none of those things. Of course, everybody that opposes the left becomes a white nationalist, particularly if you're white. And Laura, during the first segment, or the second segment, I also suggested that maybe we'll be wearing Stars of David, which say, yes, I'm white. Okay, so the left will know who to discriminate against, and they'll be absolutely clear about it. But here's the thing that really is important. Notwithstanding the libel and slander cases I brought for her and for myself and for other conservatives is the fact that we actually stood up to big tech. We brought a lawsuit against big tech, Freedom Watch and Laura Loomer and yours truly, based on the discrimination against conservatives, people of faith, and those who believe in the vision and conception of our founding fathers. We filed it at the lower court level. It was an antitrust case seeking to create competition, claiming that what was going on was an agreement and restraint of trade because these big tech companies were acting in parallel, in tandem, cutting off conservative content from a public forum. And we also filed under a District of Columbia law, which allows for cases for discrimination on the basis of ideological belief. Of course, District of Columbia is highly leftist. They were trying to protect the left, but ironically, it could be used for conservatives as well. Well, believe it or not, a Trump-appointed judge, Trevor McFadden, a total hack, was the judge assigned to this case, supposedly randomly. He dismissed the case. It went up to the D.C. Circuit, the appellate court. Leftists dismiss it because they like the discrimination against conservatives. It furthers their ideological agenda. And then we filed a petition for writ of certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court to decide the case and to take it up. And here's what happened. I'll let Laura explain it to you, because just this Monday, although they did not accept our case, the only honest judge on that court, intellectually honest, Clarence Thomas, by the way, a black. The black people in this country, the conservatives, are the only ones that have guts. The rights generally are running for the exits, putting their heads down, saying, leave me alone, do what you want. Radical left, radical blacks, radicals of the Marxian Jewish left, radicals, atheists, radical lesbians, transgenders, gays, radical feminists, radical everyone. Do what you want. Okay, leave me alone. I just want to go off and play golf and play tennis and have fun with my family, and that's it. Leave me alone. But Laura and I will not leave them alone. Laura, tell the listeners what we did and what happened with regard to Justice Thomas, one of the few people, frankly, who have any guts on the court today.
Yeah. Well, we filed the petition, and of course, we were waiting for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it was, in a very unprecedented manner, rescheduled for a conference 5 times, which is unheard of. But we found out why, and that's because they were waiting, and they were discussing the case regarding Donald Trump as well. But ultimately, Justice Thomas, even though he issued a concurring opinion deciding not to review our case, he still found the merit and the basis of our case to have value, which is why he issued an opinion saying that the arguments within, in which we argued for antitrust, saying that these companies have too much power, were valid. And he also lended support to the idea that these companies need to be broken up, just like the telephone companies and the telecommunication companies were broken up. And so we were able, through our case, to get an opinion from a Supreme Court justice. And really, I would say it's a win, even though they didn't take our case, because it's the first time in history where a Supreme Court justice, especially a conservative justice, has come out and said publicly, you know what, it's time that maybe we have a conversation at the court, and eventually we will have to address this issue of breaking up big tech and regulating them. And this goes, this strays away from traditional anti-regulation principles within the conservative movement, but we are no longer a conservative movement. We are a nationalist movement, and the idea of limited regulation and limited government intervention is dependent upon living in a free market society. And we no longer live in a free market society because the tech monopolists have become so powerful, and these companies now make up a quarter of our economy. Our economy is about $21 trillion, and these companies now make up about $6 trillion or more. And so when you have an economy that is so dependent on these tech companies, there is no free market. As I say, a free market is now a Google board meeting. And so now it's shifted people to start thinking, well, maybe we do need to break them up, and maybe we do need to regulate them. And it's funny because the left is having such severe cognitive dissonance over this because they're so in favor constantly of regulation. But now that conservatives are finally saying, yeah, we do need to break up big tech, the left wants to call it the Marxist delusion. But they are, in fact, the Marxists themselves. And as history has shown us with the Holocaust and the Second World War and the rise of the Nazi regime, it is antitrust regulation, antitrust laws that are absolutely necessary to break up tyrants and oppressive authoritarian regimes like communism and Nazism.
What's interesting is that Elizabeth Warren, who ran for president as a Democrat, that evil party that's become the party of the devil, the party of socialism, communism, and atheism in particular, she was in favor of breaking it up. Of course, that was before the left took over total control of this country. So I suspect she's no longer for that. But let's talk about the parallels to Nazi Germany. You understand that, Laura, because you are Jewish. You have fought against racism against Jews in particular, and for all people. You've taken on Ilham Omar.
Not only just because I'm Jewish, but because I'm a responsible American who actually appreciates history. I'm not a radical progressive leftist who is trying to erase history and erase Holocaust curriculum from our education system like the Democrats are actively doing. You know, here in Florida, they're trying to remove Holocaust education. And one of the reasons why is not only just because they're absolute Jew haters, but because they don't want people knowing about the measures that were taken specifically with regards to antitrust to deal with the Nazis following the Second World War. You know, there's a lot of things that happened that shaped our country and shaped global history. And that's what these people are. These people are communists. They are the real fascists. National Socialism, Nazism is a leftist ideology. And so, of course, they want to remove history and get rid of history books and curriculum because they don't want us to have a record of how we dealt with these tyrants.
And that's very, very important. Tell us what you've done. I mean, for instance, you know, in this country today, okay, if you're a black leftist or if you're a Muslim who is anti-Semitic or whatever, okay, you're a protected species. You can say and do anything you want, okay, you can get away with it. Whereas if you're white, you're going to pay the price. You know, whether you're a lawyer who's fighting the establishment in Washington, D.C. I'm fighting, you know, with the District of Columbia Bar disciplinary apparatus that's trying to eliminate people like Rudy Giuliani, like Ted Cruz, like Josh Hawley, like former Attorney General Bill Barr. I don't even know why they're bothering with him since he was worthless, and Kellyanne Conway and others. You know, we're white, we're conservatives, we're going to go after you. But if you're black or if you're Muslim, you're protected. Tell us about your experience with Ilham Omar and Rashida Tlaib, and you know what you said that makes you a white nationalist and a white racist, as they brand you in the leftist media. By the way, the leftist media primarily controlled by the Marxian Jewish left, I might add. These are the people that come after me. These are the people who come after you, our own people. These are people that are trying to destroy Israel. These are people who are anti-Zionist. These are people who, frankly, are the disciples of Marx. Tell us, you know, the hypocrisy, and that's not even a word, the dishonesty of the way everything is now set up in society, particularly with your efforts to expose Ilham Omar and Rashida Tlaib, these two anti-Semitic radical Islamic congresswomen.
Well, first of all, what's very dishonest from the onset is the Twitter terms of service. Regardless of whether it's my case or anyone else, as an investigative journalist, I said that Ilhan Omar was anti-Jewish and pro-Sharia. I am an investigative journalist, and yet my statements of facts, right, not opinion, of facts, so much so that the Democrat Party was forced to actually draw up a resolution to combat her anti-Semitism was deemed hate speech. And having hate speech policies to ban people and to silence them and deplatform them and digitally exterminate them from the public discussion is dishonest in itself in America, because the Supreme Court has already found, right, since we're on the topic of the Supreme Court, that there is no hate speech exemption to the First Amendment. And so there's been numerous cases. And one of the cases that this pertained to was the National Socialist Party versus the village of Skokie, in which you actually had a Jewish attorney by the name of David Goldberger who decided to represent Nazis and skinheads and in this predominantly Jewish community because he said, just because they're Nazis doesn't mean that they don't have a First Amendment right. And the Supreme Court sided with them. And so we need to get back to a point in this country where it doesn't matter how offensive something may be. It doesn't matter whether you find facts or journalism or somebody's just, pure opinion to be offensive. We need to uphold the Constitution. We need to uphold the First Amendment. And, Justice Thomas agrees because he said that these companies can't use the First Amendment. They can't violate the First Amendment, as a pretext for their hold, right? Their egregious amounts of power. And that's really what he was conveying in the beginning of his opinion, which was in response to the case pertaining to Donald Trump and him blocking Twitter users. And then he finished it off, of course, by issuing an opinion about our case. But this is really what it boils down to. It's a manipulation of semantics, a distortion of the truth, an elimination of history so that people are uneducated and unaware. If you amend history, if you erase history, there are no records, there are no history books so that people can point to cases like I just did to say, these people are full of crap. We have no hate speech in this country. Therefore, there is no justification for these erroneous terms of service to silence people on the basis of, ooh, you hurt my feelings.
Well, here's an important fact, though, as well, Laura. We can't overstate what Justice Thomas did. Basically, he said, I'm powerless to act. He basically said, my fellow Supreme Court justices won't take up Klayman's and Loomer's case. So he then wrote his concurring opinion in the Trump case. And then he even said that, our petition for writ was correctly rejected. He was throwing a bone to his colleagues because he's got to live with them. You see, you and I, we don't mince words. We don't back down. We don't try to split the baby in two. Okay.
But just because something is rejected doesn't mean that it's not truthful. I mean, look,
that's true. That's true. But what I'm saying is the American people need to rise up now, Laura. I'm saying the American people need to rise up. Okay. Do not depend on Clarence Thomas or anybody else. That's what I'm saying. And that's why I wrote my book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. Yes, Clarence Thomas paid lip service to us. But the fact is the current situation still exists. And it's similar to the one that was in Nazi Germany with the propaganda machine that Hitler had. Mm-hmm. And that's an important thing that American people must remember. There is no recourse in the courts anymore. It's over. American people must now rise up, take back their legal system, take back their country, because no one is in our court except ourselves. That's the point. But you are courageous. You're doing that. And that's why I admire you so much. That's why you're my friend. And that's why you're my client. And so tell people where they can reach you quickly. We have 10 seconds.
They can go to Loomer.com, and they can also follow me on Parler and Gab at Laura Loomer.
Keep the faith, sister. We're going to win in the end. God bless.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
Now the verdict, ladies and gentlemen. White people in this country have become the Jews of Nazi Germany. And I know that my black colleagues and friends, such as Alan Keyes, such as Armstrong Williams, and I know Justice Clarence Thomas as well. He respects me and I respect him. And many other black conservatives don't agree with this because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We're all equal in this country. But this country has been taken over by the radical left. And it's much more than a race card at this point. It's an actual persecution against whites. It's being used as a cudgel, as a way to take control of the entire country. Everything is racist. Anyone who challenges the views, the edicts, and the actions of the left becomes a white nationalist, a white supremacist, and an alt-right. The director of the FBI, who's become the butt boy of Biden and Harris, kept his job, was worried he was going to be fired, said that what happened on January 6th was primarily the result of white nationalists and supremacists, that white domestic terrorism is the biggest problem in this country. What a total whore. But he's no different than most of the judges on the courts. He's no different than big tech. He's no different than the sports leagues. He's no different than labor unions. He's no different than corporations like Coca-Cola and Delta. He's no different than the radicals in these groups, because everybody simply wants to put their head down, pretend, no, we don't live in a leftist dictatorship. Well, we live in a leftist dictatorship. And in fact, Joe Biden has just said, nothing in the Constitution is absolute, no amendment. He can do what he wants. He's worse than King George. As I said, he's pushing socialism. He's pushing communism. He's pushing atheism. God becomes the government. Why all of these taxes that he's going to raise? Why these huge bailouts? Why relieving students of debt up to $50,000? Why forgiving agricultural loans, even by blacks that can pay them back? Why paying reparations on top of that, getting 10% off the top? I can go on and on and on. Why the deluge of illegal immigrants that will vote Democrat and keep the left in power? And then you have a Republican Party that's dead. It's worthless. They're meeting in Palm Beach this weekend. It's like a funeral. They're trying to figure out what they can do without Donald Trump, because they don't want him part of that party. The leaders of that party are Mitch McConnell, a crook just like Biden, who took money under the table from China. We'll be indicting him too. We've been moving against federal judges and other judges. In fact, that's why I founded Judicial Watch back in 1994. But the situation was not as bad as it is today. As Jefferson said, federal judges will become despots and tyrants because they're unelected, unaccountable to the people. We saw what happened after the last election. They wouldn't even give President Trump a hearing, a substantive hearing. They just dismissed stuff summarily, right off the top. The American people have been left unprotected, and we need to fight back with our citizens' grand juries, with our Third Continental Congress that we're holding in Philadelphia Memorial Day, to alter and abolish this government and to form a new government peacefully and legally, and to reenact our Constitution, and to get an electoral system not based on fraud, but based on actual people, real people who vote, and to shore up a lot of other things, discrimination on the basis of ideological belief and ideology. We must rise up. We must not be afraid. The answer no longer is in the establishment courts, either state or federal. The answer is with divine providence, with the Father and His Son. The answer is with us. The answer is with the American people. And that's why my book, It Takes a Revolution, says get up off the couch, turn off Sean Hannity and company, stop being entertained, do something. Join Freedom Watch's Justice League at freedomwatchusa.org. Support our citizens' grand juries. Support our Third Continental Congress, or do something else with some other group that does more than just get documents and boasts about it and goes on Fox News. You can take the documents where the sun don't shine. That hasn't done anything. Election integrity projects, what has that done? Nothing. We, the American people, need to rise up before it's too late. We are living in a post-United States which is similar to the post-apartheid South Africa. Thank God that was abolished. But what took its place? The Communist African National Congress. Crime is rampant in South Africa. I'll be back next week. Until then, remember that God helps those that help themselves.
Cascade Platinum every night saves you water every night. Come meet me at the dishwasher bay.
See, hand washing dishes in your sink uses about 4 gallons of water every 2 minutes.
Naughty, naughty, sing.
But with Cascade Platinum in your dishwasher, 4 gallons of water gets the whole job done.
Slow the flow of that H2O and change your routine.
Do it every night with Cascade Platinum.
A surprising way to save water.
At T. Rowe Price, we've guided investors through change for over 80 years. Our team of financial consultants is dedicated to helping you reach your goals with insights and personal guidance.
I am here because I want to make things happen for our clients.
We're on the same team. Investors have retirement or investment goals in mind, and our goal is to help them get there.
So as you navigate life and market changes, we're here to help you make informed decisions for the future. Learn more about achieving the retirement you've always wanted by clicking the ad. T. Rowe Price. Invest with confidence. Invest with confidence. Invest with confidence. Invest with confidence.